I just want to thank the Brand Innovators team for sandwiching the health insurance guy between sports betting and the CMO of the NFL, who we're in the middle of a negotiation with. So, apologies, Tim. That's going to be ugly.
We wanted to clear something up real quick. Seth and I were chatting, we get this a lot on the plane going through the airport here. And you see the kind of mislabeling of what's going on here. We're not playing in the game. Seth and I are not. We're not on the Eagles. We're not on the Chiefs. We cannot introduce you to Tom Brady. So that's not there.
Thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, these guys were worried.
Well.
A couple autographs on the way in.
You get it a lot. Seth and I are both coming to you from New England. Me from New York, Seth from Boston. Do you care to tell them what the weather was like Friday and Saturday?
Negative 25 for anybody who's hanging out in Boston.
We had to do a preparatory call for this, and we were forced to do it on a landline because the Zoom was crashing because of the weather, believe it or not. So anyway.
I'm moving here directly after this.
Yeah. So Seth Fishbein, obviously the head of enterprise media and sponsorship marketing for Cigna, an official NFL sponsor. Seth, the first thing I think we want to find out is what's your role? How do you see it? And what's your sponsorship portfolio like?
Yeah, sure. So I lead our enterprise sponsorship marketing and paid media center of excellence. So we support the enterprise of Cigna, which is a Fortune 12 these days. So this healthcare category is getting pretty wild and pretty large. It's about 75 campaigns in a given year on the media side, all brand media, all performance media, ad tech, martech, analytics and modeling on that side. And then on the more interesting side, perhaps, the sports marketing side, end-to-end sponsorship marketing and management, so activation, experiential, measurement. We have some industry conferences, and then some of our community marketing and mobile tour.
Great. For those of you who don't know what RTL AdAlliance is, we are essentially the NBC Universal of Europe. So we are the largest media company in Europe. And the way I like to explain it, if you've ever been familiar with pan-regional media anywhere in the world, we're not that. We are the local champion in each market in Europe. So we are the biggest television group in Germany. We're the biggest television group in the UK. We're the biggest television group in Italy. And so we sort of localize. So that's what I wanted to ask you about, Seth. You as an NFL sponsor, you localize and leverage and activate in a complex category and in a B2B setting. How do you go about that?
Yeah, sure. And I don't think I answered your other question. I was too busy thinking about what route I'm going to be running later. But our portfolio, so we're a national partner with the NFL at the league level. Obviously, I disclosed that. Multiple team partnerships that fall underneath that. We run healthcare's local, so pretty heavy localized strategy around some key white glove programs, things like Disney, the Masters, US Open. And then, like I mentioned, we have our mobile healthcare tour. So our portfolio is pretty vast, and that's just in the world of sports. Outside of sports, we leverage multiple brand partnerships across things like Peloton, REI, the National Park System, a lot of other partnerships there. So our partnership with the NFL, I mean, I think what's interesting is coming off of that discussion, we're about 75% B2B. So much of the great pieces that we just heard about reaching consumers are actually a small sliver of our business relative to our Medicare business. For us, in the world of B2B sponsorship marketing, it really comes down to being prescriptive, being targeted, right place, right time, being as endemic as possible. So when I think about how we work with the NFL, I think there's been a pretty big change. This is our first season. I've worked with the NFL for about 15 years, but this was our first partnership with the NFL at Cigna. I think the first couple of years were really steeped in business influence and business growth, right? So making sure we're writing or underwriting as many of the NFL teams as we can, making sure that we're maintaining a great partnership, which we have on the client side with the NFL. We are the official healthcare partner for the NFL, both externally and internally. So every NFL player entrusts their health to Cigna. They are members. We work with the veterans team, the legends team, and really the whole stratosphere of the NFL is really important to us. So we leveraged it formally in a way in which it was really all about business influence, white glove programming, and hosting. In the last couple of years, it became about three things: content and storytelling, community engagement, but really what I would call health impact engagement, and then sales enablement. So content, storytelling in our category, kind of hard, right? I mean, raise your hand if you really want to have a meaningful conversation with your health insurance company, right? I mean, it's pretty tough. It's a tough category to play in. So from our perspective, a lot of that storytelling really came from the inside out with the NFL. So if you think about what we're doing for the players and what we're doing for the league and what we're doing for the teams, the endemic nature of those stories are where we started to pull through from a content strategy perspective, right? So that could be as simple as things around preventive health messaging, around supporting spouses in their time of needs when they're going through really difficult healthcare situations on behalf of the players. It can also manifest itself in other areas like player testimonials, talking through when they've been challenged around how do they prepare given the anxiety that they may have before a game happens. So those are all kind of elements within the content umbrella. Within the community engagement piece, I think for us that really comes down to health equity, social determinants of health, really being part of meaningful and emotional conversations that are happening at the local level with healthcare. So in our world, we partnered with organizations like HAIR in Baltimore that work really closely with the Ravens around ensuring that barbers are having conversations with their clients around meaningful healthcare discussions that need to happen, right? So among this group, we may not be thinking about getting your physical. We know that's a problem in underserved communities, right? They may also be having conversations around things as simple as cancer screenings, things that we kind of take for granted. So those are the endemic ways that we plug in there. And then within the sales enablement umbrella, I think for us that really comes back down to that right place, right time. So that's really about how do we inject our key decision makers, and we have decision-making committees at Cigna, wide, long, complex decision makers in our world. How do we make sure that we're finding the right person and tagging the right lever at the right time? So we're here running a 3-day client program starting Friday, and we're looking at the decision-making committees across the split of our company to make sure that we're getting the CEO and CFO where he or she needs to be, we're getting the heads of wellness in the right conversations that they need to be in, and then we're getting our day-to-days actively engaged with the players or with the community where they need to be engaged. Was that long enough answer for you?
Wow, that was a lot.
We're not doing much. It's pretty quiet.
Pretty inspiring, though, that you guys are the actual healthcare provider for the players of the NFL. That puts you in a pretty special position with the league. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think as the folks at the league would tell you, I think for the first 2 years, we didn't quite know how to get there. And I think some of that was really due to COVID. Some of that was due to, there are just certain topics that we all know in this room we're not going to be talking about together with the league. And so I think when you toe the line about how you get really endemic with that, I think going back to some of that influencer discussion, it really comes down to the idea that if we're telling endemic and emotive stories that want to be told, and that last part is really key, right? We're not exploiting players. We're not forcing them to have discussions about depression or any other personal health situations. But these are players who are coming to us and want to actively engage with us and have those conversations. And then we pull that through to the community, right? So our definition of influencer is a little bit different because we're not necessarily using influencers to make purchase, but we're using the players to help create the activity that we need to see in underserved communities to address some of those disparities.
That's fantastic. You're not a beer. You're not your ads don't feature Clydesdales. You're not a betting app. You're not Pepsi. You're marketing to B2B companies, which puts you in an unusual category in the Super Bowl. How do you see the future? How are companies going to activate B2B marketing in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Couple tenets come to mind for me. I think one of which, and again, some of this may not be as sexy as some of the previous conversation, but the way I think about it is I think we're going to see really, really deep modeling being used in terms of how we forecast the value of these partnerships. And I think it was being alluded to in the last conversation around this notion of if you think about the valuation of IP for Cigna, who's primarily B2B, it's going to look and feel completely different than a CPG, right? So as referenced, if 60-70% of your sponsorship value is in IP, but we're a B2B company with a more targeted audience, we're not splashing the market, we're not spending like Geico, then the value of our IP both needs to work harder for us, but it's also not going to be as pervasive across our marketing plan. So I do think we're going to see a trend in how B2B marketers in sports marketing are going to start to look at the value of these deals differently. And I think the parlay of that is also the notion that we also are working with our partners to create what I would call fully customized deals. So I think there's going to be the future of we, as the brand, are probably going to bring proposals to our partners as opposed to the way it looks right now where they're bringing proposals to us. I think some of that's already happening. I think another piece for us is audience centricity. So thinking about the way I buy media, I put on my sponsorship hat within the B2B environment, and it's the same way that we should be looking at our partnerships, right? Really understanding our audience, first and third party audiences, not having to be reliant on those email blasts. I think those are all critical tenets for how we start to think about who we need to reach and making sure that we're limiting the waste on those partnerships. I think the other piece that we're going to start to see is inclusion in RFPs. So if you look at B2B environment and especially our category, right, we have 2-3 year sales cycles, really large RFPs to win Amazon, Target, Centene, any of those companies. What we're starting to see is the inclusion of sponsorship assets, content, storytelling, even data into those discussions. And we're actually at the table in those finalist meetings for RFPs. We're sitting at the table with the decision makers, forecasting things like we're doing with the NFL, like we're doing with Disney, like we're doing with some of our other partners to help get those pieces over the finish line. Because I do think that becomes a big differentiator in a category like healthcare that can feel a little bit like a commodity, I suppose. And I think the last thing I'll say is account-based management, I think, or account-based marketing, however you want to term it. In our world, I think about we can go and take Disney's IP and splash it all over the parks, or we can work together with Disney's head of wellness and go into the Florida market, for instance, and address some equity issues around LGBTQ. I think that's going to be the future for how we're going to work, bringing some of those sponsorship assets into an account-based marketing model with our clients. So we're going to market together, right? You're still leveraging Disney, but the power of the Disney brand is going to be in how Disney and Cigna go to market together.
Wow, that's a challenging brief. Okay, now about us. RTL recently announced that we have acquired the NFL rights for Germany. And we're going to be broadcasting the games beginning next year for an expanding international audience. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the NFL's playing games now in London. They're playing games in Germany, and there are ambitious plans to expand their footprint overseas. What are your plans internationally?
Sure. I think our category has gone through a lot of change internationally. I think what the NFL is doing specifically is incredibly important to us. We weren't even looking at our partnership with the NFL with an international lens really in the first couple of years. And now I think as we're starting to see Munich and Mexico City and other countries popping up, I mean, healthcare at the international level is country specific, right? So very, very hard for us to go and do what we used to do years ago with the Rugby Sevens and find a global partnership that makes sense everywhere. But I think for us, what we're starting to see is the conversation in different countries is about different elements of healthcare. And we want to leverage media and our partners to tie into that conversation. So in Spain, that conversation for us may be Americans who live in Spain who need a specific type of expat insurance. Or it may be those who live in the States who are from Spain who need a different kind of insurance. And so when we look at that spread of what we're offering across the different countries and then the audiences that we're trying to reach, that's where we start to tie back to what media partners make the most sense for us globally. And we're also looking at media partners who are willing to go down this custom content realm with us, right? This is really, really important in our category because we're not just going to buy the 15 or 30 second spot, but we want to buy more integrated packages, both globally and domestically, that allows us to be comprised of events, hospitality, like I mentioned, co-editorial, co-authored content, and then the ads themselves.
Well, I should have mentioned, Seth doesn't know this about our company, but in addition to all of the broadcast and digital assets we offer in Europe, we also own Fremantle. And we own BMG Music, and we own Penguin Random House Publishing. So we're big into custom content production.
You have the contract here? We could do this. We could do this right now.
This was a good meeting.
Yeah.
We're going to open it.
Pipeline. Boom.
We're going to open it up to questions now. Come on, you've got the opportunity to ask the health insurance provider for the NFL players in front of you now. What would you like to ask him?
So Seth, you've talked a lot about storytelling, and
about sort of local market activation, but you're partnered with the biggest property in sports globally, right? So that brings a lot of awareness to the brand. How important is awareness, if at all? And then how would you measure success at the end of the day? Sure. So let me address the awareness question is really good. So if you look back at Cigna marketing in the last 6-8 years, we ran our TV Doctors campaign, and I don't know who here remembers that campaign, but we went and got all the actors who used to play doctors on TV, Grey's Anatomy, MASH, you name it, and brought them into what I thought was a really great and consumer-facing spot. That was actually a multi-year drive to both support preventive health, but more importantly, to get the Cigna brand out there. What I would say right now is I don't think that we're buying partnerships to drive media in terms of mass scale media. So the NFL is a great partner to us, not because we necessarily need their reach at the consumer level, but I think we need their reach at the B2B level. And so that's why we're pushing them and working really closely with them on what does our media look like to help drive what I would consider to be more full funnel marketing and more of a focus on that consideration stage for us. Folks know who Cigna is for the most part. What they don't know is what we sell and how we sell it.
Anybody else have a question? Yes.
You mentioned the You mentioned talking about the inclusion piece with Disney, right? You mentioned community engagement. I guess how is impact or community engagement or inclusion changed the way that Cigna thinks about marketing in the last few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I think for us, what's funny is when I first got here, I've been at Cigna for 4.5 years. When I first got here, we were still towing the line, right? I used to joke in the media front, was like, we're going to go do a partnership with The Hill, right? Because you're not going to go with NBC, you're not going to go with Fox, so we'll just go with The Hill. I think what's happened over the last couple of years, and COVID in particular has helped to push us, is I think our category, for what it's worth, and as a marketer, I think we are more willing to be opinionated and take stands on the things that we need to take stands on, right? So for us, and again, I think a lot of that is client-driven and member-driven. If it's important to our members, it becomes important to us. And I think, yeah, we did have to tap our toes into that at a much slower pace than my previous stops at Liberty or FedEx, where, we would jump right in. But you have to be more deliberate in our category for obvious reasons. But I think now when we look at what that impact is, we've talked about working with our partners, and this is one of the things we've actually put on the proposal for the NFL, which hopefully won't get redlined, is how do we attach an actual metric to what we want to do collectively? So many years ago, we worked with Travis Kelce and others to reduce opioids, right? And we are going to reduce opioids by 25%. And by the way, we did that at the local and national level in partnership. It was co-opetition. We did it with some of our largest competitors that we would have never had a conversation with before that. We're trying to do the same thing with the NFL around health equity, right? We know that we need to address some of the disparities that are happening, whether it's like I referenced in partnership with the ACS, cancer screenings, you name it. We need to draw a line in the sand, though, and I think part of that impact and the way we're going to measure that impact is by stating that we need to reduce some of these social determinants of health and these health inequities to get to a place where we can start to see progress, especially in some of the communities that need it most.
Thank you. Hey, Matt Frary here, Academy of Pop. So I'm in entertainment right now, but for full disclosure, I used to be in insurance lead generation. So
lovely.
Yeah, I know. It's exciting.
I'll see you later.
From insurance to entertainment, right? My question is, when you're evaluating these campaigns with NFL and properties such as that and brands such as that, what are your KPIs? Are you actually measuring B2B leads coming in, the full funnel all the way to sale and so on? And are you evaluating every partnership like that, or is there an element of branding in it?
There's always an element of branding. I don't want to get that taken out here, but I think it's the element of branding and awareness against the audience that we care about. So we'll look at things like shift in brand perception, right? We'll look at shift in brand consideration. We'll look at what are the triggers that are creating that shift in brand consideration, products, solutions, services. So I think that those are some of the KPIs at the top. But yeah, like the days of measuring, and I'm a media guy too, the days of measuring impressions for us are completely out the window, right? We look at MQLs and SQLs. We're looking at qualified leads across the board. We're realists though. We know different partners are going to do different things for us. I truly believe that for us, that the community piece and that health impact piece will trump almost anything on the lead gen side for us, especially these days as we're looking at those partners. So I think that's key to us. And then we do tie in. We have Ticket Manager. We're able to look at the business influence that we're getting from folks who are coming in and out real time and all that good stuff. But I think for us, at the end of the day, it tends to be more about the community impact for our partners. And then, like I said, we will work with our local government officials, work with our local market leaders to evaluate, are the numbers coming down the way they should, and how do we use our partners to help bring those numbers down further, whether that is going to be an opioid issue or health inequity.
Anybody else? Or do I? Oh, there we go.
With content being what it is today, and you don't have any shortage of highlights on SportsCenter and things like that, but with what the world witnessed with Damar Hamlin and going on like that, has Cigna or thought of not a response, but maybe awareness of I was talking to the American Hearts, the AEDs, just like what they were, how swiftly the team responded. I mean, you guys don't probably get a lot of content because it's B2B and not the sexiest thing to talk about, like you were saying, healthcare. But with this situation,
thank you for reiterating that.
Just I would say, and a thought process like, oh my gosh, here we are. It's no longer about football. It's about this young man's health, and then what he can do to spread has the Cigna have a stance or a plan?
Yes. So I don't think we'll be able to get into that right now. But I think it's funny. I'm usually asked that, and then I'm asked the inverse of, why isn't the role that Cigna played, right, the collective role? Obviously, we weren't on the field, but the role that we played in something like what happened with Hamlin, and I think that part of our brand and how we work with our partners is a lot of what we do is truly vaccine, right? So that's why I was saying there's some really delicate nature in how we balance the conversations we want to have. But yes, I mean, I think one of the things that we have learned is when the NFL has a question around healthcare, whether it's a Cigna question or a broader question, they pick up the phone and call us, right? And I think that we're looking right now at from a response perspective, what it means for our brand to be there with the NFL and the other physicians and other key stakeholders who are on the field, and being really crystal clear on the role that we play as a collective system. Because the thing about Cigna is we're open architecture, right? We're not like an Optum, we're not like a United Health where they go and buy their physician practices and do all that. We will work with anybody and everybody. And so when you think about what something like what happened with Hamlin allows, is it allows for a connected system of healthcare to happen, right? Between the hospital, the physician, the provider, all the way through. And that's part of what we do.
Do I get to announce lunch, Damien? Lunch!
All right. Thanks, everybody.